And in terms of the intended or hoped for economic boost from that, what's your sense of that? How can you assess that?
Well, we think this is a meaningful but not an enormous support to the economy. I think it will provide some additional monetary policy accommodation. It should help somewhat on job creation and growth. It's particularly important now that the economy is close. The recovery is close to faltering. We need to make sure that the recovery continues and doesn't drop back, and that the unemployment rate continues to fall downward. So I don't have a precise number, but I would just put it as a moderate support, not something that is expected to radically change the picture, but what should be helpful both in keeping prices near the price stability level, but also providing some support for growth. I believe that one of the reasons that our recovery has been slower this year than it was last year is that we've faced a lot of financial volatility, and some of that is coming from the European situation.
If there is a liquidity run on European banks, if there's a financial crisis in Europe, what tools are you considering to mitigate, to limit the adverse economic effects on the United States?
Well, first, in Europe, there are substantial facilities to provide liquidity to European banks. First, the European Central Bank has enormous capacity to provide liquidity to the European banks. And as you know, we have conducted a swap line with the European Central Bank, whereby they give us euros, we give them dollars, and on their own responsibility and on their own credit risk, they relend dollars as necessary to European banks that need dollars.
I think most Americans perceive today that the middle class is collapsing, poverty is increasing, real unemployment, as you know, is about 16%, 25 million people without jobs or underemployed. And yet at the same time, we have growing inequality, income and wealth inequality in America. Top 1% earn more income than the bottom 50%. The wealthiest 400 people own more wealth than the bottom 150 million Americans. And that gap is the greatest of any major country on earth. Do you believe that this economy will recover so long as we continue to have this growing gap between the very, very rich and everybody else, where some people have so much and so many people have so little? Are you concerned about that issue?
I am concerned, Senator. I've spoken on this issue. It's not a recent development. You know, it's been happening since at least the late 70s that the inequality has been increasing, and at the top in particular, there's been increased income. There's a whole variety of reasons for it.
Today we have on Wall Street, the 6 largest financial institutions have assets equal to more than 60% of the GDP. Are you concerned that after we went through the disaster of too big to fail a few years ago, that with that type of concentration of ownership, where 3 out of the 4 largest financial institutions today are bigger than they were before we went through the bailout, A, are you concerned that we're going to be in a position again where Congress is going to have to bail out these financial institutions who have not changed their ways, who are still into highly speculative activities? And B, are you concerned when you have so much concentration of ownership in these top institutions that this does not create in any way, shape, or form a competitive, dynamic economy?
Well, Senator, we very much supported the reforms in the Dodd-Frank Act, which are intended to eliminate or at least substantially reduce the too big to fail problem. And as I was saying to the Congressman Brady, we no longer have the authority at the Federal Reserve to bail out anybody, and you know, it's our anticipation that Congress will never have to bail anybody out, because we've now put in resolution authority, we put in extra supervision, more capital, and so on.
Be that as it may, I'm not quite so confident that that reality may not come again. But here's my question. When you have 6 financial institutions with that much economic power, why shouldn't we break them up? I mean, do you believe that an institution is too big to fail, it should be allowed to continue? Why don't we break them up, provide more competitive aspects to the economy?
Well, the authority is there if we determine that they present a grave threat to the economy.
You believe they? Do you believe? If you were sitting where we were, would you be supportive of breaking up these large financial institutions?
I think I would look and see how the market works here. There are benefits to size. The 60% of GDP you mentioned is much smaller than many other countries that have banks that are bigger than their GDP. I think the right response is to put extra cost, extra supervision on these firms that will give them an incentive to eliminate unnecessary size, to eliminate unnecessary activities, and to reduce their risk-taking. And that's what Dodd-Frank attempts to do.